There's a moment a lot of owners reach where the business stops feeling confusing and starts feeling heavy. Not because revenue collapsed, not because the team failed, but because efforts stopped producing relief. You push and nothing lightens. You adjust and the pressure moves elsewhere instead of disappearing. And quietly, a question forms in your mind. Why does this feel this hard? It isn't from frustration, it's communication. Today isn't about fixing your business. It's about understanding what it's been trying to tell you at every stage and why the message keeps changing as you grow.
Welcome to the Budding Entrepreneur Podcast. I'm Randy Bridges, business advisor, consultant, coach, and trusted partner to service-based business owners who are serious about performance, profit, and progress. This podcast exists to do one thing: help you solve the real problems that stall your growth, kill momentum, and burn out the very people who built your business. So let's get started, shall we?
When this podcast began in late 2020, the dominant feeling wasn't from overload. It was disconnection. COVID didn't just disrupt business operations, it disrupted the context that business had been built in for years. The way decisions were made, the way trust was formed, how momentum was felt, the way that effort translated into results. All that broke overnight. For experienced owners, it was destabilizing. For new and developing owners, it was cataclysmic. We all didn't just lose certainty, we lost orientation. What had worked for decades no longer applied. The rules changed without warning, and cause and effect stopped behaving the way it used to. As a result, the business wasn't asking to be optimized or fixed. It was saying something much more basic. The environment you're operating in has changed, and the instincts you've been relying on no longer match it. That's why the feeling wasn't panic first, it was distance. We started encountering distance from our customers, distance from our teams, distance from feedback, and distance from confidence. This podcast didn't start as a growth conversation. It started as a grounding one. Because before you can build anything meaningful, you have to feel reconnected to the environment that you're actually in. And once that initial shock settled, once business resumed and the world started moving again, something else surfaced. Not chaos, not collapse, something much quieter. In 22, as the world stabilized, business returned, but it didn't feel right. Remote work felt hollow. In-person work felt inefficient and forced. Teams were present, but something was missing. I got to tell you, nothing was broken, but nothing fit. This wasn't burnout, this was misfit. The business wasn't saying push harder, it was saying the old ways don't fit anymore, but the new ones don't either. This is where many owners began turning the frustration inward. They mistook friction for resistance. They mistook discomfort for decline. But the signal wasn't failure, it was transition. By 2023, many owners were doing everything right. Their revenue existed, their clients stayed, the business looked fine from the outside. But internally, confidence quietly eroded. Owners started asking questions they didn't always say out loud, like, why does this feel harder for me than it seems for everyone else? Why can't I just handle this better? This is where I feel the budding entrepreneur made its clearest statement. 2023, it became, you're not broken. The pressure wasn't coming from incompetence. it was coming from load. Responsibility had accumulated faster than structure. Effort had replaced design. And you were carrying weight that no individual should carry alone. This mattered because until self blame dissolves, clarity can't form. In 2024, as businesses became fully virtual, something subtle shifted again. Work still happened, but it became invisible. Effort disappeared from view. Accountability blurred. Owners remained responsible for the outcomes that they could no longer observe. The business was saying work didn't increase, your ability to see it disappeared. Capacity didn't collapse loudly, it drained quietly. And without visibility, interpretation became more important than effort. Now, by 2025, AI wasn't a novelty anymore. It became embedded everywhere, stated or unstated. Speed exploded, tools multiplied, comparison pressure identified. Owners felt behind without knowing why. And the business wasn't saying move faster, it was saying speed is no longer your advantage. Clarity is. AI didn't create pressure, it simply amplified misalignment that already existed. And misalignment always shows up as urgency first. This brings us to 2026. Nothing is really broken. The business still works, and we all understand that. But the pressure no longer resolves on its own. More effort doesn't help. More leads spread the load. More goals create drag instead of momentum. Your business is saying something very specific now. It says, I still work, but I no longer fit where you're pointing me. This is the threshold moment, the end of early business adulthood, if we were to think of it that way, and the point where effort stops working, not because you failed, but because leadership has replaced labor as the constraint. To be honest, the budding entrepreneur was never meant to last forever. It existed for a phase that I began going through and I was seeing in everyone around me. It's the phase where owners ask, what am I doing? What am I going through? And why does this feel the way that it does? Now, if this podcast helped you understand yourself inside your business, then it's done its job. Because there comes a point where understanding isn't enough anymore. The next phase isn't about interpreting pressure. It's about designing a business that no longer requires you to carry it personally. Frankly, I don't know if there will be another season of The Budding Entrepreneur. What I do know is that the questions it was built to answer don't last forever. And when those questions began to fade, a different conversation becomes necessary. That conversation is about structure, about sequence, about leadership, and what it means to step fully into the role of owner and eventually CEO. That's the work we're moving into now. Not because this chapter failed, but because it succeeded. At some point, every entrepreneur stops being a budding entrepreneur. Not because they gave up, but because they grew up. So, for this potentially final episode, I want to remind you to build it smart, run it clean, and stay aligned. For the budding entrepreneur, I'm Randy Bridges. It has been wonderful to have you with me on this ride.
That's it for this episode. I hope you picked up some valuable insights and maybe even sparked a few new ideas. If you want to keep the conversation going or maybe even explore partnerships, don't hesitate to reach out. And hey, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share this with someone who needs to hear it. The steps you take today could be the start of something big tomorrow. For the budding entrepreneur, I wish you the best in your health, your wealth, your business, your family, everything about you. Take care, and we'll see you back here next week.